What's up guys, my name is BMO and I play for LOSPIRIT. One of the other things that I do in LOSPIRIT is I handle all of our live production. That's everything from writing our backtracks to making tones to MIDI, Kemper automations, everything in between. If you've seen us do it live, chances are I've had my hands in it. Today, I'm gonna walk you through how to do MIDI automations with the Kemper using Studio One.
What if you don't? What if you don't? Get it? Give up. Fuck!
If you're not familiar with Studio One, it's a recording software made by PreSonus, great for all users with any level of experience. Probably one of the most user-friendly ones I've ever come across, and everything is basically laid out right in front of you. I get asked all the time about how to set up MIDI automations with the Kemper. It's actually a really simple process, but there's not a ton of helpful information out there that explains it in a simple manner, especially when it comes to Studio One. So today, that's where I'm going to try to answer a lot of those questions for you guys. A few of the things that we're going to talk about in this video are how to set your Kemper up as a new MIDI instrument within Studio One. We're also going to talk about how to MIDI automate your performances, how to properly set up the routing within Studio One, and how to set up the routing in your Kemper for the proper MIDI channel. This will come in handy if you are a band or an artist that has more than one Kemper running live. And as an added bonus, we're also going to be able to discuss how to do live reamping. I was fortunate enough to be able to get my hands on one of the new Quantum HD2s by PreSonus, which is the interface I will be using for this demonstration today. This thing has a live reamp feature built straight into it. But if your interface has any type of line out on it, I can teach you how to do the same routing. So, without wasting any more time, let's get into Studio One, let's get this thing set up, and let's get our Kempers going. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do once we get into here is we're going to set the Kemper up as an external device. This is going to tell the computer where it's receiving its MIDI information from. Click on External Devices, and we're going to Add. Typically, if you haven't done this before, you will not see Kemper in here. So we're going to set this up as a new instrument. We're going to label it Kemper. And then in this section, receive from and send to. A little note to add here. If you are connected with a USB cable, it will show up as profiler. Just like this, right? So you want to receive from and send to the exact source. This is how you want to set this up. If you are connected to a Motu rack, a Mio, or using a Mio cable, which is USB to MIDI, you will want to select those devices that come from this drop-down menu here and just find the appropriate routing for that. But in this situation, because I am connected with a USB cable, it is showing up as profiler by default. So that's what we're going with. For MIDI channels, we're going to select all, and then this option right here, use MIDI clock. The reason we use this right here, we want the Kemper tempo and the session tempo to communicate together. If that option is not selected, and let's say for instance the Kemper is at 120 BPM and the session is at 140 BPM, you can actually watch your tempo start to do this like wave pattern, and it will jump all over the place and never fall into sync. As long as this option is checked, your tempo will stay locked to the grid of whatever it's set within the Kemper, and the session will not affect it. Just for safe measure, keep this checked right here. We'll hit OK. Once it shows up right here, hit OK, and then we're done. Next thing we need to do is just open up our session. Now that we have our session open, I want to set it up in a way like I would use it live. So to do that, I'm going to need a couple tracks to start with. The first and most important probably being your guide or reference track. Typically, I like to use a master recording of the most recent release you have or the most recent demo that you would have as a reference to play live to the track. So right here, we will add track. We need an audio track. We want to make sure that it is stereo, and then we are going to title this one reference. And then we just hit OK. Now we need to get the audio into here. So we're going to import the file. For today, we are going to be using one of our new songs that's coming out called Sad Songs. Now that I have the song in here, the next thing that I need to do is match the session tempo to the song tempo. And there's two different ways that we can do that. We can either do it down here, which the song is 162, or up here in this little hamburger section, you can come down, add tempo, and this will open up a tempo map. You can also adjust this if you need more, let's say 300 for example. So now you have a wider range, and then if we needed to flex this some, we can now stretch this up and down to be wherever we needed it to be to make multiple changes. And as you notice, the song is moving along with it, so we can do all kinds of cool stuff within here. But we have the song where we need it, so I don't need this at the moment, so I'm gonna hide that. I'm just gonna double check and make sure that everything is lined up, which it looks good to me. Perfect. The next track that we would need from here would be a metronome reference. Studio One makes this really easy because we can render the click from the session directly in place. All we have to do is set a loop range and then render the track. As you bring your cursor to the top of the marker section, it turns into a pen tool by default. From here, you can draw in your loop range for the duration that you need it. You would just zoom in and make sure that you have it set to the start and finish. I have a hotkey set up so that it will automatically create a loop range for the full duration. Once we have the loop range set, the next thing we want to do is we want to render the click in place. You would come down to the metronome area down here, click on the metronome tool, and then right here at the top where it says render, we will click this and then change to render loop range. Select this, hit OK, and then bam, shows up on a completely different track. And that's it. We now have our click track. Now the next grouping of tracks that we're going to need to add are going to be your MIDI automation track, your Kemper reference track, and then a pre-recorded DI track. The MIDI automation track does exactly what it sounds like it does. This is what's going to control all the changes and functionality throughout the Kemper. The Kemper reference is what we're going to use to audibly hear the changes that are being made to make sure they're changing at the correct times in the reference to the song. We don't actually keep this track, but it's there for reference. As an added note, this track is only important if you're doing live reamping. If you're not doing live reamping, then you could simply just play along to the song session, and if the patches are changing in the appropriate sections, then you're good to go. The DI track is what we're going to use for your live reamping. We're going to send that unprocessed signal to our Kemper. We're then going to split that signal off and recapture it and send the processed signal back into Studio One. If we were doing this live, we'd be sending that processed signal to front of house. This is what's known as a live reamp. Because I just recently set up my guitars with EMG pickups, all of my pre-recordings don't have the same output level, so I had to recently set up all of my patches to match the pickup output. So I went ahead and pre-recorded the DIs for today's example, starting with the two audio tracks first. Let's leave these empty for now, and let's change these to mono, and we are going to need 2. Hit OK. Now here is where we will change the track names. We are going to label them DI and then Kemper reference. Now to add our MIDI track, so we want to make sure that it is an instrument track, and we are going to name this one Kemper MIDI. Okay, so the tracks are added. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to bring my DI track into this session. To make sure that this one lines up. Alright, now we need to make sure that the routing within Studio One is set up correctly. So we're going to bring out our mixer and then go into our IO setup, and then this tells us what our interface is doing. So we can see our inputs right here. My DI is coming into channel 1 and my Kemper is coming into channel 2. But I want to focus on outputs up here. So right now I'm currently only showing one output as my main left-right out. I need to add an output that's going to send that DI to the Kemper. This is where your live reamp is coming from. On the Quantum, you have reamp 1 and reamp 2. These are the two outputs that are sitting on the front of the Quantum. For my wiring setup on my desk, I actually have it plugged into the line output on the back. This is the same routing you would use on your interface if you don't have the Quantum or a designated reamp output on your interface. We're gonna go add mono, and you can add one for each independent. In my case, we're gonna name this reamp out DI, and I know that it's attached to my line out 3. I want to make sure that this one is selected. I'm going to apply that and then hit OK. Now coming back into my mixer view, I have my reference track, which is going to my main outs and the studio monitors. This is what you guys are hearing. My DI, this is what I want to send to my reamp out. I don't actually want to hear my DI, I want to send it. And then on the receiving side, this is the Kemper track. I want to receive the Kemper input. This would be the actual processed wet signal. This is what I'd be sending to front of house or my in-ears. I'm receiving it from the Kemper and then I'm sending it to my monitors. So if we were doing this live, this would be your general routing. You're sending your DI signal out of one of the reamp outputs, then receiving it to the Kemper input, and then returning it to front of house and your ears in a split channel system. That is the complete setup. Now that we have the routing for the tracks in Studio One done, we need to go into the MIDI track and make sure that we have that set up. So let's get out of our mixer view and head over to our MIDI track, and we're gonna click on this drop and select the track we created earlier, which is Kemper. Next to that, you'll see a channel setting. This is where we're gonna need to go into our actual Kemper and determine what channel our Kemper is on. That channel number is important because that is what determines where the information goes from the computer. If you are running more than one Kemper, the computer needs to know which Kemper to send it to. This is what I was talking about earlier if you're a band that has more than one Kemper running live. That channel number is what gets related back to your Kemper. So if you're Kemper 1, 2, or 3, we need to set that up in the Kemper, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. So to assign your Kemper an independent MIDI channel, what we want to do is push on the System soft button on the front of your Kemper. Once we do that, we are going to page over to the MIDI settings page. So you're going to keep clicking this page over until we come across MIDI settings. Right here at MIDI global settings, it is going to say Omni by default. What this means is that it is going to fire off on all channels. We want to control this if we have multiple Kempers connected to our system. The easiest way to do this, or to think about it, is we have Kemper 1, Kemper 2, Kemper 3, and so on in the chain. It is up to you to decide who's going to be who, but it has to match throughout the system. In this example, we're just going to turn this Kemper into Kemper 1. So we're going to roll the wheel until we hit MIDI channel 1. Now that we're on MIDI channel 1, we're going to hit exit, and we're done. Now just an added tip here. The reason we add a MIDI channel and not an automation track is for one of the main reasons. If this session was set up with multiple songs, with multiple program changes, tempo changes, and they were all set up on an automation track, it would be extremely difficult to move that around on the fly. The way we're going to set this up on a MIDI track, we'll be able to grab everything all at once and shift the whole session back and forth as we need to. And that really comes in handy whenever we're working with 10 or 12 songs in an hour-long session. Like, watch me set this up real quick. Just imagine we set this up as an automation track. And I'm going to jump ahead, and just for the sake of doing this, because I'm going to explain what these functions mean later. But notice how this line goes across the duration of the whole session. So all of these changes that we want to happen, imagine this being just throughout the whole session, 10 or so songs, maybe not even 10, let's do 5 songs across multiple Kempers. And this is just one setting. This is just simply changing from patch 1 to patch 2 and so on. This isn't even getting into the deeper rooted settings of turning pedals on and off, or fading volumes in and out, or extending delay times. It would be a nightmare. Like, could you really imagine? Let's say, hey, we want to add this song, or we need to extend a break in the set by X amount of seconds. Okay, I'm going to shift this back. Wait, what about all of our Kemper settings? Cool. I'm going to highlight everything, and then now I'm going to move it. But you have to literally dive in and make sure that you get it exactly right, or your set is toast. That's why setting it up the way that I'm going to teach you to set it up, it's the same concept as grabbing the whole block of information that's in sync with the click and the songs, and you grab everything and shift, everything stays together. There's no moving it. It will save you a huge headache down the road. Trust me, I know from experience. Alright, so moving on. Remember how we set our loop range earlier? We're going to make sure that is set. This time we want to make sure it's set to whatever our click duration is. So notice how our click runs a little bit longer than the song. That's because we have a pre-count going into the song. Loop range is set to click, and then we can do 2 things here. We can grab our pen tool, and on the MIDI track, we can draw in this MIDI block. Or another hot take, since the loop range is set, we can just double click on the background and it'll automatically set the correct grid block that matches the click. This is what I was talking about earlier, where everything will match. Now, when we grab all of this, the whole block of information all matches. Okay, so I'm gonna start with changing this to a color that I will be able to see. So we're going to double click onto the MIDI block, and then we are going to change the view because we don't need the piano roll. First thing we're going to do in this window here, we're going to click here and we're going to add program change. Click add and then close it out. Something to note when doing program changes. In performance mode, all of your performances have 5 banks that you can choose from. They are set up 1 through 5. So that means that performance 1 will be banks 1 through 5, performance 2, 6 through 10, performance 3, 11 through 15, and so on. That comes in useful when knowing what to set your program change to. If you don't want to do the math to figure it out, another spot that you can figure it out is on the front of your Kemper. Right here in the lower left corner of the main screen of your Kemper, it has this block of information. This tells you the exact program change that you're on versus the MIDI bank. You can use those numbers to program the Kemper. By moving over on your patches, those numbers will change and tell you exactly which ones they are. It's also preference, but typically when setting up performances, I like to set them up in the order of which I use those performances. Let's take performance 1 for instance. The first bank will typically be the first patch that I would use in that song, and then patch 2 would be the second, and so on and so on. I do that because it's usually easier for me to remember on a programming side. It's in order every time. Typically I know if I'm on performance 2, I'm starting at 6. So whenever I'm programming this, it's patch 6 will be first, then 7, then 8, then back to 6, or so on and so on, whatever order I'm using it. Some performances I only use 1 patch. Some I use all 5, and then some I'll use all 5 with a combination of command changes where I'm turning pedals on and off, or boosting gain, or fading out, or turning delays on and off. That's a whole nother video. In my particular situation, this performance is stored as number 4 in my Kemper, which would make my first patch number 16. So what we're going to want to do is click on the MIDI block right here, and that will bring us back into the edit window. Making sure we have program change selected, we're going to click on this line right here to create a start point, and then slowly drag this up until we reach 16. So now when we get to this song, my Kemper will automatically trigger patch 16. Also, disclaimer for anybody that may have heard of us or know the song, we play the song a half step down, so the audio may sound a bit different than it does on the actual recording, so keep that in mind. So let's open up the MIDI editor. Going in here, we're going to start with patch 16, which will be a clean tone, so let's see how it pans out. Alright, so right here, it looks like this is where we would switch to a heavy distorted guitar. Right at 19. First thing you want to know about switching Kemper changes in here. You never want to switch them directly on the beat. You always want to put them slightly off. What I have found works out best for me is about a 30-second. Some guitar players will do this to taste. Everybody that I've ever set up this way has not complained about it yet. This is right at that sweet spot where you can't quite feel any latency. If you do need to adjust it, you can lock it on any point within here, but what I've found, 30-second tends to be the best. Going into how I know I program my Kemper, I know that 17 would be the next patch for me, so I would just click, type in 17, and then bam, that change should happen. To touch on when you have multiple Kempers, they all cannot be firing off in this section either. You will need to not only keep them off the same point, but you have to keep them off the same point together. Between me and our other guitar player, Pete, I'll have my guitar set to a 30-second, and then I'll set Pete to a 30-second triplet. One of us will either be before or after. Both of those times are great for the change, so you will not feel it. And if you do, it is very, very, very subtle, and like I said, you can just adjust to taste. If you had to adjust more people, you would just adjust them all like so, and then if you are also running any other MIDI devices, you would have to account for that as well. We have our change at 19. Let's go ahead and run a test and make sure this worked.
Shoulders, fuck.
Yeah, so that sounds like it did exactly what we wanted it to. So now at this point, we know those two patches change. We can just blast through the rest of the song and make sure that we get these changes right. So coming in here, let's see what happens. Alright, looks like here I change back to the clean tone. So same rule as before, we'll go back down to 16, but we'll do it the beat before. And let's just test that. So coming out of the heavy tone. Cool, cool. Alright, coming up here. Let's see. Going back into that heavy tone. Let's drop this down so I can see. So go up to 17. Just run it back one bit. So right here, I have a bit of a lead, so we're gonna switch this up. Going into my next patch. This one's gonna be another one of those to taste because I come in at a upbeat, so I need to be somewhere in between the upbeat. We're gonna go somewhere right here and just feel this out and see what happens. that was another change because I switched from a lead tone into a octave tone to resolve this section. So it would be right here at 79. I'm at 18, we'll switch up to 19 so that it hits at the down. And then we want this to switch back to the next tone somewhere in here, which would be back to my heavy tone. So let's see what happens. Sweet, and that is it. That song is done. Super simple. The only thing that I would do now, which this will be a sneak peek into the next video where I go over how to write command changes on expressions, delays, pedal changes, fades, etc., is right here in this section where I resolve the lead into the octaves. You hear this little chirp? That. To ensure that this gets annihilated, what we're going to add is I'm going to add a volume cut. And we're going to completely toast this thing. And I'm just going to give it, 4 bars. Just to ensure that it's a good enough section but doesn't quite cut into when my next patch changes. So let's listen to see if this does what I needed it to do. A complete kill. It does the same thing with delay tails and things of that nature. But like I said, I'll be making a whole nother video on how to do that kind of stuff. Well, that is it for this video, guys. I hope that you found this information helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe so that you can follow along for future videos. I will be posting more content regularly that is aimed towards all things gear, tech, and tour related, with a few other miscellaneous tips and tricks from things that I've learned throughout the music industry that may save you some headache from my failed mistakes in the past. Be sure to also follow me on my personal platforms. I'm always posting random clips and things that I'm working on that don't always end up turning into full-fledged videos. I should probably get better about that, but I'm learning as I go. I'll leave links to all of those in the description below. And lastly, if you guys have any topics that you'd like me to address in upcoming videos, drop a comment. I'd love to know what you guys do or don't want to see. And who knows, maybe I've done it. Maybe I have information. I've never been one to gatekeep or prevent anyone from learning anything, especially when it comes to tech tips and tricks. Like, really? So if I can help you guys out or help teach you something that'll help further you along on your path, then all is good. Thank you guys for all the love and support, and until next time, I'll see you soon.